Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for one of the legends of running. Every distance from 800 to 1500 to his 2:08:59 New York City Marathon, Mr. Rod Dixon. There, Rodney. Only one of my favorite guys on the planet. He's unbelievable. So Rodney, take us back to a different era. You're growing up in New Zealand. What got you into running, and who directed you, and who directed your career? Oops, make sure everything's on.
I guess it was my father and grandfather who would get me to go and round up the sheep. And I just would run out there and bring them in.
But your brother was also instrumental.
Yeah, he was a huge influence. John was 4 years older than me, and whatever John said that I could do, and he led by example, he would do it, and then he would say to me, "Now you go out and do it." And of course, you know, it was blind faith. I believed in him. And he would do things like, if I looked at the huge oak tree and, "How do you get up there? How could we ever get up there?" And he said, "Yes, we can." And he would watch me, and he would get up the top, and then he would encourage me to get up. And then I'd say, "Right, now we've got to get down." And he says, "You have to." And then he would get down, and I'd be sitting up there. But I had to figure out just to reverse how I got up. See, so he was already getting me to think for myself. And I think that was a big thing that we did in our running, is that as he coached me through, based off the Lydiard principles of training, that I was able to watch what he did and learn from that, and then figure it out for myself and understand for myself, rather than just being told something, understand what it actually meant.
In that era, you had yourself, you had Dick Quax, you had John Walker. It was a great era of New Zealand runners. What was it that, in that particular era, what was it that made the New Zealanders so great?
I think if we look back to, say, 1936 to the Olympic Games in Berlin, when Jack Lovelock won the 1500 meters and ran against the great athletes of the world, Glenn Cunningham, the American, Louis Zamperini. Right. And I think that inspired New Zealanders. I think genetically we were you know, from English stock, Scottish, Irish, and of course the heritage of cross-country running and running in England, I think, was part and parcel of the foundation that New Zealanders were blessed with.
Okay, so let's flash ahead. You're starting to compete on the world scene. 1968. You're in your hometown of Nelson, New Zealand, and you're sitting on the riverbank listening to the finals at a 1500 meter from Mexico City on your little transistor radio. What do you remember from that?
Well, I had a couple of mates there, and we had beer only came in quart bottles in those days, so we had a couple of beers, and we were listening away to this great final between Kip Keino, the African, and Jim Ryan, the world record holder, 1500 meters and the mile. And we were just fascinated by it. I mean, I was already in a running club. I joined a running club when I was 12 years old. And so we were fascinated by the history of running. And now here, you get this, in my running club, our president, our chairman of the club, was a 1948 Olympian and a British 5,000 and 10,000 meter. It was, in fact, it was 3 mile and 6 mile champion. And our club captain was a 6-time New Zealand cross country and Australian cross country champion. So these two people inspired us incredibly. So we had a lot of, we had Nelson is the top of the South Island, and there was about 430 people in our running club. And so some of my mates and I were there listening to the 1500 final.
And what were your thoughts when you were listening to what happened?
Well, it was, you know, the fact is that we saw the front running of the Kenyans. Ben Jipcho led out I mean, of course, they're at Mexico City, so it's altitude, and both Kenyans, Kaino and Jipcho, were altitude trained, and they knew that they had to work together to take that great sprint of Jim Ryan out, who was very capable often of running 50 point for the last quarter, the last 400 meters. And so they knew to work together. Jipcho went out and led the pace at almost world record pace, certainly at Olympic record pace. And we were fascinated by that. The fact that Ryan closed the gap on the last lap, but of course missed by almost 2.3 seconds. So
right.
But
coming away from that, what were you thinking? What were you thinking in terms of, were you thinking ever going to the Olympics? Were you thinking?
Yeah. I think, when you ask athletes, any athlete, what was the defining moment of their life or their career? And I think we all have it, that moment when we just sort of click in, it seems to make sense, life seems to make sense, and you decide you know what you want to do. And that's what I said to the guys around me. I said, that's me. I'm going to the Olympics. And, I hadn't run a race, really. I was a middle pack runner. But that was the defining moment for me. And I said, that's me. I'm going to the Olympics. And I can tell you, 4 years later, I was at the Olympics representing New Zealand in the 1,500 metres. And when I was called to the first heat, the first race of 3, and when they called Kaino to go to the start, the next person they called was Dixon to the start, and the next person they called was Ryan to the start. And I'm standing on the line. These guys were on my bedroom wall. I listened to them 4 years earlier, battling it out for the gold medal, and I'm standing right here. And I was kind of, I can imagine. I just turned 22, and I was just pretty blown away by it. And that was the first heat. And those of you who remember that race, Jim Ryan tripped and fell and was out of the race. I got up to finish second behind Kaino, which meant the next day I was in the semi-final. And then I actually won my semi-final, and then the next day was the final. And I remember, as we were called to the start, we had to put our sweats into a bin. And I put my sweats into bin number 3. So it was pretty full on.
And then you end up getting the bronze.
Yeah.
Nice. And how did that change your life? All of a sudden, 4 years earlier, you didn't even know if you're going to be a great runner. Now you're an Olympic bronze medalist and starting to travel the world a little bit, right?
It was. I went to, just after the Olympics, we went to London to the international athletes. It was called the Coca-Cola meeting, and most of the Olympic champions were invited, and Crystal Palace was the venue, and completely sold out. And I chose to run the 2 mile, and because I was a cross country runner, so I really was ideally suited to 5,000, 10,000, but there's something passionate about the 1,500, and so I lined up in this race, and right beside me was Steve Prefontaine, who had just finished 4th in the 5,000 metres, and he was stepping down to 2 mile. Mind you, he was a 3:54, 55 miler.
But that's a long way for you at this point. You're stepping up to 2 mile.
Yeah.
So you're not going to go out and take the lead.
No. So I knew that the British had put a couple of good runners, rabbits, in the race to ensure a good time. I settled into 4th just behind Prefontaine because I knew he was a natural leader. He wanted to go out and just run everybody into the ground. He wanted to just make you all honest, and that was the perfect kind of race for me, to sit and run hard laps right from the word go rather than sit and wait for the sprint. So lap after lap, I think was hoping that somebody would come through, and nobody would, because why would you? Because you rode it right on world record pace. And with 200 metres to go, I got right up onto a shoulder. With about 150 to go, I set out for home, and I set the British Commonwealth New Zealand record Prefontaine set the the American 2-mile record, so it was a pretty good night for us all. And at the Crystal Palace Sports Hotel that night, we had a few more brews, so it was cool. And he liked his beer, I can tell you.